Actually, the first thing that I've got for you is a quiz. Don't know if you can see this properly, but you don't necessarily have to put your hand up and answer, but I want you to just have a look at these pictures here and see if you can tell me what you think that they've got in common with each other. So I'll quickly run through them. You've got a washing machine, let's say a next generation car of the future, whether it's electric or whatever, energy efficient light bulb, the iPhone, the iPod, a Blu-ray player, iTunes, Wikipedia, and Westfield Shopping Mall. So you don't necessarily have to answer. The answer is going to come about midway through the presentation. So just have a think, see if you can see what those have got in common. The next thing is to kind of introduce myself a little bit and let you know why I'm here. And I'm here because of a concept that I've been working on called the virtual footwear wall. And this is a digital concept that we execute in retail, bringing the best of online to the offline world. But instead of trying to describe it, I'm going to show you a video now which just goes through some of the results that we've achieved as well and should give you a little flavour of what this is about.
Adidas designs 4,000 shoes every season, but how do you fit them all in store? Our solution was the virtual footwear wall, a unique retail experience that puts every shoe at consumers' fingertips. With Prime Sense cameras that know your gender, smart searching, and high-level 3D real-time rendered images that rotate and zoom to capture every detail, it's never been easier to find the perfect shoe.
We're not going to lose.
Just pick out a couple of key stats from the video. We installed the wall in several locations, as you can see there. One of the stats is we installed the wall in one store in Japan, and we were doing pre-sales of a product that wasn't yet available, wasn't out yet, and we were asking people to pay up front to receive that product on the day it was launched, up to 2 weeks before it was launched, I think. We sold in one store 22% of all of the sales for Japan, and the product was available in 400 stores. We also installed in a couple of Intersport doors in Germany, and we were able to measure the sales performance before and after. And fortunately for us as well, we don't normally get this, but we got the data from our main competitor as well, from Nike. And we saw that in the stores that we installed, prior to the installation, our sales were about level. And after the installation, Nike's sales went up by 14%. Our sales went up by 149%. So we gained the equivalent of 10% market share from them just through this tool. And it's basically just providing a totally different experience in the store. The world of retail, though, at the minute is a bit of a strange place, and this is a bit of a sort of snapshot of the last few years since the financial crisis. And you can see there's been quite a few retailers going to the wall. This is quite a UK-centric, and there's a couple of US examples as well. And maybe the UK and the US are a bit more extreme than other markets in the world, but it shows you a bit of a picture of what's been going on and potentially where things are going. And looking at this, I started to look into it and say, well, okay, I'd like to kind of dig into the details of why this is happening. In some cases, it's kind of obvious. The retailer themselves had nothing, no real proposition to the consumer, and it was kind of living on borrowed time, and not really that surprising that they went bankrupt. But there are some examples where it's a little bit more surprising that they went to the wall. So I started to dig into the details of that and look at what's going on. And I'm not going to go through every single one of these because some of them have been mentioned already, but these are kind of some of the things that I think have been driving change in the last 4 or 5 years. I'm going to pick out a couple in particular. I think most of them are self-explanatory. The ones I want to pick out is this one here. This is there to represent social media. But in particular, you've got people have talked about social media so far in the fact that you can drive word of mouth and people can influence much bigger groups of people than they've ever been able to on a global scale, etc. But the other aspect of social media that's interesting is the way that it influences how people buy stuff. I've used this example here from the App Store. So how many people in the room here, put your hands up if you would, how many have bought an app in the last 4 weeks? Okay, now keep your hands up if you would. Put your hands down if the app that you bought had 4 or 5 stars. Put your hands down if the app you bought was rated at 4 or 5 stars. There's nobody left. And that's my point. You don't buy stuff online that's reviewed with 1 or 2 stars. The typical procedure these days is that people have a look at how many stars it's got, maybe 4 or 5, and that's the first filter criteria. And then they maybe go in some more and have a look at the reviews that have been left and see what people have said about that product, and then they decide to buy. But immediately they're eliminating the ones with 1 and 2 stars. And if you think about, okay, that's how you buy apps, but think about that's probably how you bought your last holiday as well. Go online and have a look on TripAdvisor, what did people think about the hotel where you're going to stay, and then make your mind up if that's really the one you want to take or not. And this is getting bigger and bigger, so obviously ratings and reviews are happening on Amazon, and they're influencing the way people buy, and it's just getting more and more extensive. But the key thing about this is, when you enter a store, it's invisible. In the store environment, in a typical retail store, all of that information is not exposed. So you've no idea what other people think about the products. And what you might do is go on your smartphone and start searching on that to get that information. The other one that I want to just call out here is these strawberries, which is possibly looks a little bit out of place on this slide. The reason I put that there is because they're there to represent this mindset of sustainability and greenness, or whatever you want to call it. But these strawberries are from Marks and Spencer's, and the key thing which you can't really see in this size is it says on the label where those strawberries were grown, and it basically says that they were grown about 20 miles away from the store where they were bought. And it's instilling this kind of impression with people that in order to be sustainable it must have been locally sourced. And yet there's a little bit of a paradox there when you look at the way that products in the world are sourced. That generally isn't the best way of doing things, and isn't necessarily even the most sustainable way of doing things either. But it's giving people that impression that that's how it should work. The other thing then, if you start to sort of summarise, the summary of that first slide really is that prices are massively under pressure from above and below as well, by the way. Then if you start to look into the kind of new rules of how to do business, etc., and I'm working in a marketing department, one of the first things that you have to kind of recognise is that brands are no longer really in control of their own brand. You can no longer control the conversation because of things like social media. And you have to kind of recognise that the consumer is now in control. I have one extreme example of this, if you just bear with me a second, and what this really means. So there was a consumer, I don't know how old, maybe a youngish kid, who decided to go online and create a video for himself on YouTube. And he used footage from a couple of different Disney cartoons, but he recut it with different content and recut it with different music and things like that. And he posted it, and it went viral, and it was pretty popular. What did Disney do about this situation, that somebody had gone online and used their content and cut it and made it their own, if you like? They went and sued him. And now this is like probably a 14-year-old kid who just was playing around in his room, and they tried to sue him for breach of copyright. And that's the extreme example of what it means. You can't be in control of your brand, and then if you react in the wrong way, it is much more negative than saying, hey, that's actually really cool, you're promoting our brand, you've done it in your own way, etc. So that's one example of how the consumer is now in control of your brand, and it's better to work with them in that scenario versus try to control them and close it all down. Then the other thing is, what's changed is shopping is everywhere. I've been working in retail for nearly 20 years. When I first started, the only way that you could really buy something was to physically go to a store and pick it up, or maybe to go through a printed catalogue and pick up the phone and place an order or send it in the post to somebody. These days, you can buy from pretty much anywhere you want via your smartphone. You can buy through all these different types of channels. Smart TVs are becoming a sort of feature of the home again, and I'm pretty sure that shopping channels are going to start appearing on there again. And I don't just mean the QVCs, I mean digital shopping channels on your smart TV in your living room. You can buy through games consoles. You don't need to have stores on the high street selling games anymore, because you can just go on the console and download it immediately. The other thing about this is, I'm pretty sure if we were to come back to this 5 or 10 years from now, there'd be a whole bunch of other things on there that we don't even know exist yet. So the summary for me is that there is a massive shift happening in retail at the minute. Change is underway, and shopping behaviours and the way that consumers act are massively changing the business models. And you can see this through retailers like HMV in the UK, which is basically bankrupt because people don't want to go into a store and buy a physical CD or DVD anymore. And it is starting to affect certain sectors of retail more than others, but it is going through the entire retail chain. So I sort of looked at that and said, okay, what if you were to then try to project forwards a little bit and look at what may change in the future? One thing we can say for sure is that the practice of shopping online will continue to improve. There are a load of websites out there today that aren't really the best experience in the world, but there are ones that are leading the way. And I think if you were to look at web shopping today versus 5 years ago, you would already admit that it's massively better than it was, which means that it's only going to get better and better. With things like faster data speeds and better computing power, the experience of shopping online will continue to get better. The other part of online shopping for me, which is important, is this part. So there's more and more of this. This one is actually offering one day or next day delivery, but there's more and more of same day delivery popping up as well. Actually, the best example I have is from a physical retailer. There's Aurora Group in the UK that operates stores like Oasis, and they are offering 90-minute delivery to 90% of the UK population. And they said that the fastest that they've managed so far is 16 minutes. But you can imagine if websites are able to offer same-day delivery in the future, then the one key aspect that physical retail has, or the one of the key benefits that it has, which is the benefit of instant gratification, starts to be eroded away, and people can really just shop online and get it delivered same day and get the product they want. Then you've got this issue of what's being termed showrooming. So I don't know if you've heard of this term or not, but basically it's the practice of people going into a store, checking out the physical product in the store, using loads of time from the staff, etc., finding out about it, really getting to know the product, and then saying, thank you very much, I go now online, maybe on Amazon, and I buy it and get it delivered to my house. And if you think about it, there are certain sectors of retail that are affected much more than others, because if you think about buying a fridge or a TV, for example, you can't exactly go into your local store and say, I want to buy that fridge, and then put it under your arm and take it away with you. So in the end, you're going to order it online, let's say. Even if you go in Dixon's and order your fridge, they're still going to have to deliver it to you. So why not go home and just get the best price? So this is a trend that's starting to happen. Actually, in this particular example, the showrooming example I just explained wasn't what was happening. I think it's worth just explaining that as well. This girl went into a store and wanted to know which was the best trainers for her. She wanted some running shoes. And she couldn't decide. She'd tried a couple on. She'd asked a member of staff, but they hadn't been able to convince her one way or the other. So she decided to go on her phone in the store and check out ratings and review sites, as I was saying before. And she was checking out what the experts were saying about these two products and making her decision based on that. Then we're kind of in a experience economy at the minute. We're all about experience. As consumers, we want more and more experience. And there are retailers out there who already offer that as their business model, like Starbucks, for example. And you can see there what a difference it makes to the kind of prices that you pay when it's all about experience. And I'd say that there's another one that's a really good example, not just the typical one of Starbucks, but Nespresso is a perfect example of this as well. But we're moving potentially from a experience economy to a transformation economy, meaning that people are wanting brands and retailers and people like that to help them become better. There are a couple of examples out there just to put this into context and so you can understand what I mean here. The obvious example is Apple and being able to go to an Apple store, buy an Apple product that you've never used before, and then spend time with one of their staff and learn how to use it. And they used to have in a lot of their stores these theatre installations where they would run training sessions about different pieces of software and how to use it. That's a transformation experience. Going in and coming out more knowledgeable than when you entered. There's other transformation experiences which are much easier for you to get, or much easier for you to see that it is more than just a unique experience in Apple. One of them, I would say, is going into a woman going into a department store, going to the makeup counter and asking for a consultation and being told what is the best makeup for your skin type, etc., and getting a full makeover in the department store. That is allowing her to understand more about the product and herself and how those two things work together than when she went in. That is as well a transformation experience. So what's happening in retail is that in the future, I think you will have 100% transparency of prices and of the way that your business does business. So there was an example in the first part about Nestle and people saying online about they don't like the way that Nestle does business. Those kinds of things, if you have any problems in your business or the way that your business does its business, then you could potentially have a problem. And shopping will be everywhere. Omni-channel is the current buzzword, however you want to explain it, but this omnipresent retail experience wherever you want to experience it. And then consumer expectations, I think, are going to grow and grow and grow. People want more from their shopping experience, especially if they can just sit online at home and buy it and get it delivered the same day, then they will expect more of their physical experience in the store. And normally at this point as well, I kind of say, okay, I think that there's an elephant in the room that hasn't yet been discussed within the retail world. And that is the minute we're in this kind of survival of the fittest phase. And retailers out there are really trying to be the fittest and the last man standing, if you like. So the one example I use, I read a few reports around Dixon's Group in the UK is now pretty much the only retailer that's left on the high street selling electronics. And a lot of the reports that I read said, okay, they should be fine now because they're the last man standing, therefore their business is going to survive and prosper, because Comet has gone to the wall and Best Buy's pulled out of the market, etc. Well, it's interesting here. I don't know if you know, I've used this picture on purpose because it's a picture of elk or reindeer or whatever you want to say. But the interesting story here is how this species procreates and continues. So the elk, the male of the species, fights with the other males for the right to mate with the females. And the way that they do that is using their antlers. And typically, the one with the biggest antlers wins. And what that means over hundreds and thousands of years is that the gene for large antlers is carried through the gene pool, which means over time, the antlers get bigger and bigger and bigger. For the individual elk, that's a benefit because the individual elk has bigger antlers, can defeat his male counterparts, and can win the battle in the right to mate. For the group as a whole, it's a negative. They're actually breeding themselves to potential extinction because larger antlers makes them more susceptible to their prey. To their predators. So they're easier to catch. They become slower. They can't navigate through the forest as quickly because they need a larger and larger gap to get through the trees, etc. So for the group as a whole, this survival of the fittest thing isn't necessarily positive. And if you go through a long, protracted battle, you actually come out potentially weaker at the other end, potentially to be just wiped out by something else, which is much stronger than you are because you've gone through this protracted long battle to stay fit and healthy. And to be honest, being the last man standing on this kind of high street is not going to get you anywhere anyway because there's not going to be any consumers. And this is a genuine picture. This is a picture of my local high street from where I originally come from in the UK, and this is Rotherham High Street. Okay, Rotherham's not the most metropolitan city in the UK, but if you read the papers, we've got things like a 30% vacancy rate on a bunch of high streets out there in the UK right now, and it's because of the changing way that consumers are shopping. It's not necessarily just because of the financial crisis. So the answer to the quiz from before, did anybody have a guess at what it was? I won't put you under pressure. Basically, the answer to the quiz is, if your business in the past was about making or selling these things, and you didn't update to become about selling or making these things, and finally to do these things, then you're probably bankrupt. And the one perfect example that I use here is the story of Fuji and Kodak. If you know anything about the story, basically Kodak invented the digital camera and said, bit of a problem, that's not what our business is about, we're about making wet film, therefore let's put that digital camera in a drawer. Also other things like it's not good enough quality, the consumers want fine print, etc., etc. But they basically said it's a bit of a threat to our existing business, we put it in a drawer, we forget about it. Fuji did the opposite a few years later and decided, although their business was about producing wet film and things like that, that they would actually start manufacturing digital cameras, compact cameras, etc. And I'm sure you know at the minute Kodak is bankrupt and quickly trying to offload all of their business that has anything to do with photography and wet film, and Fuji at the minute is successful. But the question I would ask to Fuji right now is, does it make sense to stay in the digital compact camera business when this thing on the left of your picture is probably going to eliminate the need for compact cameras? So, in my mind, retailers must innovate in order to remain competitive and relevant on the high street. And business models may need to be updated and evolved in order to be able to do that. And for me, I think there's three potentially big issues that need to be addressed. From our point of view, as a brand operating our own retail operation, I think that we set and raise a certain expectation with the consumer which we currently really can't deliver. And that is that if you are a consumer that likes Adidas and you know that we make certain products and you know that we operate our own stores, you would automatically assume that if we make that product and we sell it, we would therefore sell it in our own store, which is not the case because our stores have to operate under the same restrictions as every other retailer out there. They have to be commercial and they're restricted by the size of the physical space available. And we make 4,000 articles of shoes per season, actually 8,000 if you look at the entire business, and a typical store stocks maybe 200, 300 if you're lucky. So we set this expectation with the consumer that we will deliver that entire experience of our brand, but we can't deliver it. And the other thing is, retailers until today, pretty much every retail business in the world has been grown on this strategy, which is get as much retail space in the market as you possibly can. More and more stores, more and more square meters or square feet or whatever, and that is the way that we will do business and become more and more profitable. And the question is whether that's really going to be the strategy for the future. You already see retailers out there saying we're operating 20 to 30% too much space in the market and we need to downsize. Philip Green has said that recently about Topshop operation in the UK, for example. And Best Buy in the US is massively under pressure, and potentially the next one to go bankrupt. But they have recognised that they need to downsize their operation because they have too many square metres out there. And then the next one, which is interesting, is corporate structures. Our business is one example, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be many, many businesses out there that are structured in a similar way to us, which is that they are structured into vertical silos. In our particular case, we're structured into 3 silos of sales. Sales online, sales through our own stores on the high street. By the way, we have 2,200 stores in the world. And sales through wholesale channels. That's 3 sales directors, all with their own KPIs and everything else and responsibilities. Now the question is, if we're structured in that way and we make a sale in our store that is delivered via online business, who's credited for that sale? And the 3 of them at the top of the tree can come to some sort of agreement and say, okay, fine, if we sell something in a store, then that person gets the margin or whatever. But what about the staff member on the shop floor who is expected to be as happy to sell something online and not get that, not have that credited to his bonus, as he is to some spending 20 minutes with a person about a product that they physically have in the store? So the staff members need to be thought about here. How are you going to incentivize staff to want to sell an online product? And John Lewis in the UK is a great example here. Basically, they tried to do online sales in their stores and failed in the beginning. And then they decided to relook at the model, and they failed because the staff weren't interested. They saw it as a competition to what they were doing in their store. They looked at the model again and said, right, okay, every sale that we make will be credited to the store. So they set up postcodes around the stores and said every sale that we make online will be credited to the P&L of that particular store. And not only that, even better than that, every return to the store. So if somebody bought something online and brings it back to the store for a refund, we'll take that and put it into a separate P&L. So they'll get all of the benefit and none of the negatives of helping this online business grow in store. And at that point, the business took off. So if you look forwards, a few of the principles that I think that need to be put in place for retail in the future. First of all, you have to put the consumer first, put the consumer at the heart of everything you do. And that slide that I showed before about the corporate structure, what would be interesting is to redraw the corporate structure and put the consumer at the top of the structure, not the CEO. And then look at how that would change your entire business. And I think retail in the future needs to be built on a foundation of e-commerce. Retailers until now have seen e-commerce as a bit of a competing beast, and they've been a bit afraid of the e-com business, and they didn't see it as something that they wanted in their own business. But now I think that they need to make it a foundation of their business, because they have to accept that people may come into their store but want to order online. And then looking at the logistics operation, pretty much every retailer has built their logistics around the principle of getting the product from the warehouse to the store as fast as possible. But going back to what I said before about restructuring the business and putting the consumer at the top, what if you were to say that the challenge is to get the product from the warehouse or get the product to the consumer as fast as possible, to the consumer as fast as possible? Meaning that every point of distribution that you have, no matter whether it's a shop or a warehouse or whatever, is effectively warehouse space and could become a fulfillment centre for the consumer. And then it's about blurring the lines, or whatever you want to call it, but bringing the best of the online world into the offline world and combining the two. And what you should do when doing that is not forget about the other really key benefit that retail has, and that is that it's a physical human experience. Okay. The best thing about retail is the fact that consumers can go in there and they can actually interact with a person, which is what an online retailer can never do, even if they do it on the phone, via live chat or whatever. The physical experience of retail is the key benefit that people need to play to. And when we did the virtual footwear wall, in the beginning a lot of people said, okay, so what you're actually trying to do with this is remove all the stock from the store. No, we're not actually. We're trying to extend the range in the store via the virtual footwear wall and give people a broader offer, not less of an offer. And you're trying to eliminate staff. And basically they thought that it would just become a self-service terminal. People go in, they find the product they want, they order it, and then they get it delivered or shipped or whatever. No. What we've seen is that the best thing is when we have the virtual footwear wall and a member of staff and the physical product in the store, that's when the sales really take off, because it's a great experience that complements what's already there. And then omni-channel is really important. I think it's been mentioned a couple of times. For me, all this means, to not spend too much time on it, is that it has to be a seamless, joined-up experience across all the different points of distribution and points of purchase. The ecosystem thing, I think, is interesting because this comes back to the question of putting the consumer first. For us as a brand, we don't do this, by the way, but this is what I would love for us to try and get to. I think the best proposition for the consumer is if they come to our store and say, I'd like to have this Predator in black in a size 8, and we go in our stock room and find that it's not in stock for whatever reason. Then we would come back and say, okay, we don't have that product in stock, unfortunately, in your size, but I can go online here and I can see that JD Sports, 200 metres down the road, has got your product. Would you like me to save that for you in their store and they can fulfill the order? We lose the margin in that particular case, but I'd rather do that than have them walk out of the store and go to the Nike store next door and buy the equivalent Nike boot. Doing all of this would enable you to optimize the range of product that you have in store and concentrate maybe on the products that are more emotional, that have more experience behind them, because you can deliver the basics online. You don't necessarily need to stock all of those basics all the time. And it comes down to questioning for me whether the product is rational or emotional. I think there should be more emphasis placed on creating an experience around the emotional products versus giving loads and loads of square meters to rational products. So the fridge on the left, the way that somebody would buy that is to basically say, okay, is it energy efficient? Is it the right size? Is it the right colour? What price is it? And by the way, member of staff, which one do you recommend to me? Because that white fridge is available from every single brand and there's hundreds of them. So why as an electronics retailer would you give loads of space to stocking that when you could give loads of space to giving experience around the emotional products? And then retail has to become about offering an experience. It should be an experience centre. This is an example of something we did in our stores that enabled people to customise a product. It should be fun, emotional and social. People should want to go there and have fun and then share that with other people in social channels and talk to others about it. It gives people a reason to buy things there and a reason to recommend it to others. It should be about services, and I really mean services, not service. It's not just about a member of staff giving you customer service. It's about the services that you can offer through the store and maybe learning from some of the online retailers about what they've been doing. And things like extended warranties and same-day delivery and all that kind of stuff may need to be part of the offer. I think as well, something to learn from, I mentioned Nespresso already. I think what they do brilliantly is they build regional flagship stores which have loads of experience in there. And then when they build their local smaller stores, they don't take all the experience out. They distill it down and they keep the best elements of the experience and deliver it through the smaller footprint stores. And ultimately, it comes to the question of questioning the purpose of the store. This is Toyota on Champs-Élysées, and I'm not necessarily suggesting you go this extreme. This is a store on the high street that basically doesn't sell anything. It's just an experience centre. But you could question the purpose of retail and say it becomes a point of service, a point of experience, a point where you can click and collect, a point of looking at distribution, of delivering products directly from there, etc. It's not just 4 walls of product that most retailers are today. And the one last thing that I have on my last slide is I think what Nespresso have done brilliantly as well is looking at the end of the experience and the after parts, if you like. So in retail, typically the worst part of the experience is the last part, which is paying. Paying is physically painful. You're having to hand over cash. Nobody wants to do that. And a lot of the time you have to queue to do it as well, so they make you wait to have a painful experience. And Nespresso stores are always busy and have long lines, but at the end of that they say, would you like to have a free coffee now? Which puts something else at the end of the experience. And by the way, emotionally, people remember the last thing the most. So putting the worst part of the experience at the end is what people will remember. Even if they had a great experience the rest of the time that they were in the store, they remember the last part the most. And if that was a bad experience, that's what they will take away with them. And Nespresso changes that complete thing by just saying, would you like a free coffee? And then, of course, there's all the follow-up that needs to happen afterwards. So in summary, these are the 5 things you can read for yourself, but those are 5 of the things that I think that need to change for retail in the future.